Hello viewers, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Sajid Sheikh, Assistant Registrar Academic from Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai. Today we will be talking about human rights violations against women. Our old Indian tradition preaches us Matru Devo Bhava, which means worship the mother. It advocates that women should be treated as goddess. But if we look at the history, we find that man has subjected women to his will, used her as a means to promote his self-gratification, but he has never desired to elevate her to the rank which she was created to occupy. He has done all he could to debase and enslave her mind. And now, look at how triumphantly on his ruin he has brought. Though ancient literature pinpoints towards a better position for the female, yet many ancient writers, for example, Confucius, Aristotle, Manu, and many more, were of the opinion that it is a natural right of a male to assert dominance, and the females are accorded inherently inferior position. As a type of property, they can be transferred or sold off, and even under the Greek civilization, females were kept within the four walls of the houses. Defining violation against women is not simple. It is generally conceptualized in form of physical force and destructive conduct. The simplest definition of violence is the behavior designed to inflict injury on a person or to cause damage to property. It can be defined as any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering to the women. It also includes threats of such acts, coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. Although women may be victims of any of these general crimes such as murder, robbery, cheating and much more, only the crimes which are directed specifically against women, that is gender specific crimes, are characterized as crimes against women. Various new legislations have been brought and amendments have been made in existing laws with a view to handle these crimes effectively. However, the occurrence of such violence is rampant. If we talk about the extent, women's human rights are violated in a variety of ways. Of course, women sometimes suffer abuse such as political repression that are similar to abuses suffered by men. In these situations, female victims are often invisible because the dominant image of the political actor in our world is male. Violence against women maintains the structure of gender oppression, be it carried out by an individual in private or by institutional forces in the public sphere. Families, communities, and social, legal, and civic institutions may covertly and overtly endorse it. While violence commands greater attention and fear, sexism and misogyny do their share to shape inequality by defining and upholding restrictive gender norms. If you try to find out the genesis of such human rights violations, the answer is that patriarchy, power, and culture give ways for such crime. Let's talk about patriarchy. Patriarchy is about the social relations of power between men and women. It is a structural force that influences power relations whether they are abusive or not. If we see girls in India are abandoned on the roadsides, they are put in garbage bins, the infants I'm talking about, and bathrooms and all. In India, the families and villages celebrate the birth of a boy and they weep at the birth of a girl. Not only are these infant girls the victim to this problem, women are too facing such problem. thousands of women are forced by the family members, and especially their husband, to have an abortion after they find out that the sex of the child is a girl. In India, having an ultrasound to know the sex of the child is illegal, yes. But more than 40,000 registered clinics exist just to reveal the sex of the baby, and they conduct illegal abortion. And I'm sure there are probably more unregistered clinics for such kind of activities. Let us talk about power. Power sets the schema for patriarchy, but conflating it with the abuse or masculinity is not right, and we need a more complex analysis of the typical power and control explanation. Feminism, which is about women claiming their right to self-determination and equality, confronts gender conformity and aims to replace relationships of power with relationships of meaning. And if we talk about culture, we have seen that culture is used to define gender inequality and violence by invoking traditional cultural beliefs about like how women should be treated. The culture of patriarchy is not static. Its manifestation, for example, on an army base differs from that in a rural town, just as the culture of patriarchy in, for example, Chicago differs from that of Dubai or Manila or India or UK. There is a very important landmark case, that is Vishaka and others versus state of Rajasthan. In 1997, in the Indian Supreme Court, this case where Vishaka, which is an NGO, and other human rights groups filed a public interest litigation against the state of Rajasthan and Union of India in order to enforce the fundamental rights of working women under Article 14, 19 and 21 of the Constitution of India. This petition was filed after Bhavri Devi, a social worker in Rajasthan, was brutally gang raped, and as she was trying to stop a child marriage, which was a cultural taboo then. Recently, we have seen that judiciary has been very stern with these cultural and religious arguments. In a recent Haji Ali case, the trustees were of the opinion that permitting women up to the tomb of Pir Haji Ali Bukhari would be anti-Islam, and they claimed immunity as it was a minority trust. However, terming the ban a violation of the fundamental right of a person enshrined in the Constitution, the Honorable Bombay High Court permitted the entry of the women in the restricted grave area of the famous Haji Ali Dargah, and which is located on the rocks of the Worli seashore. If we talk about racial oppression, analysis of violence by men of color against women of color tend to overemphasize how racial oppression contributes to men's use of violence. But within communities of color, we have seen women and non-abusive men who are exposed to similar social histories of oppression do not resort to battering to cope with racism, just as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and queer women, men do not resort to hate crimes or intimate violence because of homophobia. While oppression based on race, class, gender, homosexuality and many more are undeniable explanations relying on oppression, they are inadequate because the intersection of race and gender are very much complicated. Race is all too often privileged over gender. However, this and other intersectionalities together offer a more effective route to accountability and transformation. The situation in India with respect to violence against women is alarming. In 2015, as reported by the National Crimes Record Bureau, a total of 3,27,000 394 cases of crimes against women were reported as compared to 337,992 in the year 2014, thus showing that there is a decline of 3.1% during the year 2015. These crimes have continuously increased from 2011 to 2014, but slightly decreased in 2015. Uttar Pradesh is with 18.5% share of country's female population and has reported nearly 10.9% of total crimes committed against women in India, by registering 35,527 cases, and in West Bengal we have seen that which is accounting for 7.4% of women female population, which has accounted for 10.1% of the total cases of crimes against women in this country, and it registered 33,218 cases during the year 2015. This data further shows that cruelty by husband or his relatives forms the highest violation of rights of women. 34.6% offense of assaulting to outrage the modesty of women amounts to 25.2%, rape is 10.6%, and offenses of Dowry Prohibition Act are 3%. See the data. In the beginning of 1980s, due to increasing violence against women, it led 35 women organizations and student activist groups and trade unions to form a coalition which was called as Dahej Virodhi Chetna Manch, which advocated changes to India's then existing dowry laws. Their concerted efforts led to the passing of Dowry Prohibition Amendment Act in 1984, which broadened the meaning of dowry and increased punishments for those requesting dowry. Furthermore, through the much needed amendment in 1986, which shifted the burden of proof to the accused and increased imprisonment to at least 5 years and made the offence a non-bailable offence, and it also appointed dowry prohibition officers. Thereafter, in 1986, dowry death, which was introduced in our Indian Penal Code to address the societal concern about the dowry-related death of newly married women, was there. To address the concerns about the effectiveness of its amendments, India passed the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act in 2005, which provides civil remedies and access to justice for victims of domestic violence. Unlike previous legislation, criminal remedies now included monetary compensation for the aggrieved person and her children as well. The Act also offered a very comprehensive definition of domestic violence and also recognizes marital rape, requires the appointment of protection officers to assist victims, and further acknowledges the importance of collaboration between the government and other external organizations in protecting women. With a very simplistic procedure. The procedure is very simple. India also established the National Commission for Women in 1992 to examine the provisions protecting women's rights in the Constitution and existing laws, and to provide recommendations to address gaps in these statutes. In keeping with its mandate, the National Commission for Women reviewed complaints and acted on the cases to ensure speedy justice. The Indian law dealing with the offences of sexual harassment has been given under the Indian Penal Code 1980, which is a criminal legislation. The code defines the concepts of rape, stalking, assault, and many more, but it does not define the word eve-teasing or even molestation. It has defined the offences and the elements which constitute these offences. and it has also prescribed the punishment for the same. For example, take section 509. It prescribes the punishment for outraging the modesty of women by uttering any word, making any gesture, or doing any act with the intention of outraging a woman's modesty. Section 294, it prescribes the punishment for committing any obscene act or uttering or saying obscene songs. And similarly, if we look at section 354 of IPC, it prescribes punishment for use of assault or criminal force to a woman with the intention to outrage her modesty. Something that may not amount to outraging modesty in USA may amount to outraging modesty of women in India. What may be obscene act in India may not be considered obscene act, for example, in USA. Apart from this offense, the offense of sexual abuse or molestation may also be addressed under section 354 of the code. The provisions of Indian Penal Code dealing with the offense of rape have been laid down under section 375 and 376. The very horrific December gang rape and subsequent death of a 23-year-old Braveheart in New Delhi ignited a national furor over the India's treatment of women and the perceived culture of complexity with regards to sexual violence in India. It was due to this nationwide protest which we saw that the law was amended. Section 375 now provides for the definition of rape as the penetration of penis or any object to any extent in the vagina, urethra, anus or mouth, or manipulation of body parts of women so as to cause penetration or application of mouth to private parts of a woman, etc. The new law also incorporates very stringent punishment in section 376 for rape, for gang rape, as well as for acid attacks. It has also made special provisions to prescribe punishments for the offense of rape, where the offense of rape causes death or leaves the victim in a vegetative state. It also prescribes grave punishments for repeat offenders for the crime of rape. Apart from these measures, the government and the courts, they have laid down several policies and guidelines for ensuring women's security in this country. For instance, there has been an establishment of a special system of women's helpline. This number isn't applicable in Delhi and many other states. Special regulations have been made for women's safety in public transport. New and suitable laws have been enacted. Even special phone applications have been made available which could help tracing persons on the move. Even if you take example of Ola and Uber, they have the facility of tracking your near and dear ones. They can track you where you are going. Apart from ratifying CEDAW in the year 1993, India also passed the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act in 2013. This has made the workplace more safe. However, the loopholes in the Indian law and the absence of complete description of certain offences like eve teasing and penal provisions for such sort of offences is a major lacuna which has to be covered, which is needed to be covered. It is important to make a complete set of laws which could cover all such offences and make the society safe and secure. If we try to categorize the perpetrators of such violence, we can easily categorize it into violence by family, which includes like domestic violence, sexual abuse of children, in household, dowry-related violence, rape, incest, etc., honor killings, it is there. If we talk about violence by state, we see custodial rapes happening, torture by police, killings, violence in the situation of armed conflict, land acquisition for development purpose, and the violence which is caused in that regard, mass crimes, etc. If we talk about violence by community, rape, sexual abuse, sexual harassment at workplace and other public places, acid throwing, witch hunting, trafficking in women and children, and force, prostitution, communal violence, etc. And violence against the marginalized classes is also there. Now the question arises, whose concern is it? This violence is happening. Who has to take a step? There is a need to change the mindset of government functionaries, of the society, of family, and of the individual, whether it is man or woman. All of us should come out of this protective shell and work together to bring an end to all kinds of discrimination, injustices, and violence against women. Gender insensitivity, sluggish judicial system, insensitive law implementation, inactivity of civil society are some of the main causes of the deteriorating situation in our country. Now what can be done? Efforts done so far on gender issue defy basic and simplistic solution. Elimination of all kinds of human rights violation against women requires channelizing simultaneously the attention and the efforts of the people concerned, and all people have to work together. This delicate issue needs intervention and action at multiple levels, be it at state, society, individual level, public level, and in private capacity as well. Amongst immediate steps, the most important task of the government is to control continuously deteriorating law and order situation in the country. There should be a vigilant policing, round the clock check in both cities and suburban areas, and more police force should be there, especially women police force in the police stations. State justice emboldens the spirit of criminal minded elements in the society who take advantage of these loopholes in law, and this enables them to escape. Many culprits go off scot-free even after committing a very, very heinous crime. Reforming the structure and system of governmental institutions which are engaged in the lawmaking and enforcement tasks, they are highly desirable, but it may take a bit longer time. There is a specific role of non-government organizations also. These organizations and institutions should conduct series of seminars, workshops, meeting at different places on various aspects of violence and also oppression against women. They should discuss in depth the gravity, enormity, and the dangers of continuously deteriorating law and other public order position. Self-centered attitude of individuals are alarming in these days. Bestial acts against women, which makes it very unsafe for women to move freely outside their homes, and we need to try and find a remedy for it. Even media should bring women issues to public domain in a very forceful manner. They have been doing that, but much more is required. They can play a very important role in spreading awareness. They can provide a platform to speakers and panelists from different fields, eminent personalities responsible for decision making. They should share their views and conduct an in-depth study on various gender issues, thereby holistically touching the various aspects of this problem. Views of some of the victims of atrocities should also be taken into consideration in order to understand the unpleasant experience and the manner in which they came over these agonies and which they suffered due to these inhuman acts. The dictum "violence is preventable" should be the motto. Gender sensitization should focus on the sensitivities and boundaries of man-women relationship, code of conduct with respect to opposite gender in different settings, and different strategies to prevent violence at unusual places and at other times should be there. Relationship handling exercises, violence prevention and communication skills should be instituted in the youth through training workshops at schools, colleges, and at community level. Medical and paramedical workers and medical students should be sensitized on the topic of tackling sensitive issues of gender. Sex education needs to be given at the level of schools, colleges, and community. Training of different stakeholders like police personnel, judiciary, administrators, and legal profession is also needed. If we want to summarize, we can say that the patriarchal mindset of the judiciary must change towards being gender neutral. Indira Jaising, the additional Solicitor General of India, aptly stated, and I quote, "It's time for India's courts to gaze inward and throw out the deeply embedded patriarchal notions that stop judgments from being fair to women. Sexism within the system has to go before it does more damage in the country." Unquote. The growing menace of physical and sexual abuse against women needs urgent attention. The society and the government should make the necessary efforts in bringing in and enforcing specific laws targeting the issue relating to sexual abuse. The police authority and media should play an important role in sensitizing the women about their rights and remedies available to them. Many of these women are unaware of their rights. Though the state and the state authorities have been making very sincere efforts to implement measures to provide a safe environment to women in the society, but the evil practice still persists and corrupts the social harmony. It is also very important to empower women through law reform and social change, so that there is a sense of security amongst the women. At workplace, Committee Against Sexual Harassment should be very much active. The work done by our nation's various governmental and non-governmental organizations in this regard is highly appreciable, but there are many gaps which are still unfilled. But the question still remains as to the efficacy of the measures provided. We should not wait for the incident to happen. We should work on the cause to cut it from the bud. Indians living in the democratic societies that value freedom, we must work together to ensure that all of our citizens can enjoy freedom and that each person's human rights are respected. However, a modest beginning has to be made within the family, wherein gender values and gender sensitization should be inculcated in the children for their better development. The real change has to begin from you. Thank you.